Well, hello guys, welcome back. I'm not sick. I got about 4 hours of sleep, so I'm gonna kind of slur my way through this video. I am sorry, but it's a good and timely question, and I got 4 hours of sleep, which kind of will be mentioned in the answer. One of you asked, how do Loki, Odin, and Thor handle us failing a test as opposed to the Christian God? We usually, even if you didn't grow up Christian, if you fail a test, usually his response is not well, according to Christians. Now, it depends on the Christian you ask. Some Christians will say, oh, 70 times 7 about how to forgive you, and you either confess your sins or you do whatever, God will forgive you forever. He will never abandon you or forsake you. They're starting to it's interesting, they're starting to kind of come closer to us, some of them. And they're starting to say, well, God would never, never abandon you. We know we've said that for like 2,000 years, but that's actually not true, because if you read the Bible, he will never forsake you, which that's actually in the Bible. He will never forsake you. It's just don't screw up on purpose. Like, don't deliberately go out of your way to do bad things. So they're kind of in this weird thing, which is why I was attracted to go see what they're doing. They kind of realized for 2,000 years they've been trying to scare the living hell out of people. And now they have people leaving their churches on masses. I'm sorry, 4 hours of sleep. And the interesting thing is they have thousands of denominations. I didn't know this, and none of them agree with the other ones because they all form a new denomination on one point of theology alone. So they're just in a mess right now. You could ask one person from each of those thousands of theologies that they have, and they would give you a different version of their version of sin. And the only reason I'm cleaning that up is because it's interesting to see them stumbling in the right direction finally. They've gone from the God I grew up with, who, if you failed a test or if you committed enough sin, like being gay, if you're Roman Catholic and gay, that is not compatible, you would be cast out forever and you would go to the bad place, which now they're like really vague about it because it's not the 16th century, so they're not going to scare us with devils and pitchforks, but you still go to the bad place, wherever that is exactly. Now they're not saying, because now, hey, it's been 2,000 years, now we have science and we know about the universe and everything, and the church has been wrong about everything for 2,000 years, so now they're kind of trying to change their story, and that kind of has to be part of this answer, because now we have new Christians saying, hey, we were wrong, okay? We admit we were wrong, and we try to scare people for 2,000 years, and now that we're not trying to scare you, we're not sure if we actually have much of a religion. We're actually confused. Because if you take the fear part out of it, if you take God's going to abandon you if you don't give us your money or do the right thing, the religion kind of collapses because it's literally built on fear. It's built on the fear that if you don't pay back this God for the sacrifice his son made, he's going to abandon you. So they're going through that crisis, which is kind of the crisis you go through when you come over from Christianity, any flavor, to paganism, because you were taught this is the one God that created the universe. And if you abandon him, if you deliberately turn your back on him and go worship these false idols, he's going to abandon you. And he's going to turn his back on you. And our gods aren't like that. If you grew up, for example, well, everybody teaches differently, but if you grew up, say, Wiccan, and you worship the god and goddess, and you grow up and you decide in high school Jesus is calling you, so you say, Mom, Dad, I don't think you're a bunch of crazy devil worshippers, but I hear this God calling me, I want to go see where it leads. So our gods wouldn't turn their back on you. They wouldn't say, okay, she left us for him, of all the gods, we're going to turn her back on you. Same thing with Loki, Odin, and Thor. If you work with them for a while, and you get deliberately mad, and you go off in a huff, and their god kind of works the same way. and you fail a test because whatever they're doing you currently think is not fair, and that's kind of like your test. They're not going to get mad at you. It depends on your relationship. Sometimes they'll remain silent. Sometimes they will come after you. And not in a scary way, but they will keep trying to get your attention, whichever way they can do it. Be like, hey, I'm still here. I know this sucks, but come on, buddy, we gotta get up. As Loki's fond of telling me, he's like, you don't fail. You just don't do the right thing 20 or 30 times in a row. You eventually get it. He's actually really positive. Thor's really positive too. Our gods actually encourage us when we're going through something hard in life. They encourage us. Like, lately this month, I've been talking to them. I said, this month seems cursed. And it's not. It's just a challenging month. I had bought Loki a game, and this is going somewhere because it's talking about facing a challenge. And it turned out to be a terrible, crummy, horrible game. And I had spent that money, a whole $10 on a video game, because I thought my Patreon was coming in. And 2 of my patrons walked away on me. So I lost over half my check. So I was like, I can no longer afford this game. If Loki had loved it to the moon and back, and it had been his favoritist game, we would have gone panhandling or something. But I took it back, and then I remembered that that was a game I'd actually offered him and bought him because I was rewarding him for being good God. Well, one, he's gotten additional games. We bought 8 or 9 free games between the 2 summer sales. They were free, and a couple 99-cent titles. And he ended up getting more games than he gave back, but I still felt guilty. And he's like, well, it's okay. You need the money. So we took that back. And, I get up this morning and I'm stumbling around. And I don't know if I told you this recording. I'm sorry. I am on 4 hours of sleep. And I just felt emotional despair because I had arrived to this decision last night. After I hurt my shoulder. I hurt my shoulder in the bathtub. Even then, and even with all my arthritis acting up and being full of pain, I made this decision because a mambo that I used to work with sent me an email. And the email said, look at a situation in your life and give yourself objective advice. Like you would give a good friend. What would you tell the friend in your situation? And I'm like, why, if I was talking to myself as a friend, why are you chasing a god that don't want to be caught, that don't want your phone number? Are you really afraid he's going to cast you somewhere if you don't? Are you really afraid he's going to abandon you and not take care of you and your gods are, incapable of doing it on their own? And I was compassionate with myself. I'm like, look, I understand you. You love this god, and it might be a bit of a fair reaction because you live in this Christian society and they're always hammering home what God's going to do to you if you abandon him. But mainly you want to go back and get him because you love everyone, kind of. And you don't want to give him up, Loki, don't you start. And you want to go back and try to rescue him, but he don't want rescued. If he really wanted to be with you, he would be giving you healings and signs as your healings. You just hurt your shoulder. You're in miserable amounts of pain from, your arthritis. If this is a challenge he's sending, he's a cruel god. And if you fail it and he walks away, well then, he's a cruel god. So I'm talking to Odin as I'm sitting there with my shoulder banged up and I'm like trying to dry off with, can't move one side of my body. And it's still messed up. I don't know how the hell I did it because I'm graceful, that's why. And my arthritis is acting up over time. And he's like, are you sure you want to go through with this? Because I told him the advice I gave myself. He says, this is really probably not the best time for you to be making this decision. And I said, yeah. I said, usually I'm a pretty good pagan, but every so often I get what I call the Christian crazies. And I'm like, oh, he's abandoned. He's out in the desert. He's crying his eyes out. No, he's not. And if he were, he would have to come a courting. and show he's serious and give good gifts. And he isn't doing any of that. I said, I know it's always been you or Loki that's answered my prayers. Maybe Thor, maybe one of the others. But I said, it's always been a pagan god that's answered my prayers. I said, you've all been very gracious as for years I've tried to fix the impossible. You can't take a god. I know people have tried. We've all tried. You can't take a god who will not get along with everyone else and demands you must worship him and him alone or he'll abandon you. And put him with gods that are like, they really don't care. Our gods, in my experience, really don't care. They don't want you getting messed up in all that trauma and all that negative teaching, but at the same time, they're like, if you really want that god that bad, you could work with him, but you know how it is. You work with him for 5 minutes and somebody starts screeching about sin, and you're back to feeling miserable and guilty about yourself. So our gods on their end don't care. So, like, if we would fail, so to speak, because to them it would be failing a test to go talk to another god, they're just going to shake their head and say, look, I gave you that advice for a reason. I didn't give you that advice because my feelings will get hurt. I gave you that advice because that god is surrounded by this. And that's what Odin and Loki have been trying to do lately. I was like, why did they spend my money on these books? And I ended up throwing them away. They wanted to remind me of what I'd walked away from. And I haven't really been in too close a contact with it. My friends are annoying Christians that try to push you to church, but I haven't been really that close to Christian theology for decades. I kind of forgot. And this was the most permissive, bubblegum friendly version of their religion. Our gods don't abandon us. Everything coming together to last night and today is kind of like a perfect storm of me trying to deal with all this on 4 hours of sleep. Was not Loki or Odin or anyone punishing me. It was, I knew last night in the back of my head, I said, hey, I should write the check out. I should have wrote the check out last night. That I didn't do it is not like punishment from the universe. But I should have wrote the check out last night. I know the plumbing in this house is goofy. It makes sounds every so often, but it's been 4 hours of sleep, so I was pretty sure the house was falling apart while this idiot's out there cutting stuff. And then as I'm running around to try to find my checkbook, I'm panicking about how many checks are in a book and how many checks do I have and when do I have to reorder checks. Well, if idiot doesn't somehow decide he has some other service and I don't get roped into buying that, I have enough checks for about a year. And I'm like freaking out because I can't do basic math. I never could do basic math, but I really could do it this morning on 4 hours of sleep. If I got 4 hours of sleep. And even though I had a disaster from all that and being in the pain, Loki hasn't yelled at me. Thor hasn't yelled at me. Odin hasn't yelled at me. They haven't said this is a test and you don't have enough faith. And the funny thing was, you know how Pinterest is. And this is going somewhere too. Pinterest will not stop sending me Jesus pins because every so often I pin on a private board Jesus memes because they make me giggle. Not mean-spirited ones, but like silly ones. And I had gotten rid of the board. I've gotten rid of it repeatedly because I'm like, well, I'm faithful to the pagan gods. I shouldn't even be doing this, but it gives me this strange kind of comfort. It's like having Jesus in your life, but not actually having Jesus in your life. It's like, oh, Jesus. But it's a fun version of Jesus where there's no sin and death and, judgment. There's this pastor that left the church. And I think this would actually be the best answer for all of us. He left any kind of church. I don't think he's an atheist, but the way he talks, they would think he's an atheist. That there's this one cartoon where Jesus is hanging on the cross. No, anybody almost in the world could tell you Jesus died for your sins. And as Jesus is sitting there, hanging there, suffering. We were taught in the Catholic Church it was suffering. It was Jesus felt God had abandoned him. Now God hadn't abandoned him. God was literally there with him, but he felt abandoned. Think of what he'd gone through. He'd gone through 3 years of ministry, always was having to run away from the Pharisees, and finally got caught, and he had prayed, a little while prior to this, to the point where we're told that blood was coming out of his eyes. And that can actually happen. Humans can go through so much stress that blood starts to come out of their eyes. It's very rare, but it does happen. And he was praying, to his father, who was begging him. He said, I don't want to go through this. He says, if you want me to, I will, but I know what's coming. I don't want to go through this. Because remember, he was a good Jewish boy, not a Christian. Jesus wasn't Christian. Living in a time where crucifixion was common, had he just kept his mouth shut and said, you know what? I didn't say any of that, he would have been fine. Had he at any of the time he was going before King Herod or something said, hey, it was, it was for laughs and giggles. I'm sorry, I won't do it. Hell, whatever. He probably would have gotten off later. Had he done anything, he probably would have got off later. Now, keep in mind, we have a story handed down about him that wasn't written down until a couple hundred years after his death. That said, he chose to do the sacrifice for whatever reason. And as he's hanging there, and he feels God has abandoned him, there, in this cartoon, people were telling him, well, God hasn't abandoned you, you're just not praying enough. And I'm telling him all those Christian-y things that Christians say when stuff goes wrong. Well, this is a test, but, it's your fault if you don't feel God or something else. And it reminded me of something else, too, because that's not a very Christian way to talk to people, in case you've forgotten. Mother Teresa. Everybody thought she was, like, the greatest little lady on the planet. She was. For decades of her life, for at least 10 years, the last 10 years of her life, she didn't feel God. She was so overwhelmed by the overwhelming poverty and lack of compassion she saw every day that she just stopped believing in God. It's like a lot of the rabbis or priests or whatever that went into Auschwitz or one of the other camps. You can reach a point where you see just so much terrible things around you that you lose any kind of belief at all. And God didn't talk to her for like the last decade of her life. And a lot of those priests and rabbis that lost their faith, they stopped believing in God too. And he apparently never made contact after. So we can, do something like that, like say lose our faith. Sometimes it's, hard to have pagan faith in a Christian world because they're the dominant default. But our gods don't abandon us for that. And if it were a case of our gods and we had gone through something like that, they're not going to abandon you if you lose faith. I don't believe their God abandoned them either, but they certainly felt he did because they were taught he could fix everything, so why wasn't he fixing this? Our gods don't abandon us. Our gods wouldn't even consider that level of horror a test. They would consider that this is something you have to make your way through, and we will help you through it, even if we can't end it for whatever reason. I think the gods basically all got together at one point, and it's really bad theology, and they said, look, we all love our humans, but if we keep interfering all the time for our own individual humans, we're going to just be running cross purposes to each other. Nothing's going to get done. Like, if I don't want to have my lawn grow, for example, this is silly, and I don't want the neighbors to be making noise, and I don't want to have to pay a bill in my life, that all works out for me. Maybe my gods are happy and getting glory, but the people that cut my lawn are out. The people that are neighbors that would like to like maybe make some noise, like cutting grass or anything around, everyone else around me suffers. So they probably all agreed, like, we're going to set up natural laws, and they're all going to be praying to us and yelling at us and complaining because the neighbor is cutting the grass and I'm trying to take a nap, which I often do because I'm a night person. And the guy keeps coming, cutting my lawn, taking my money, which kind of has to happen because grass naturally grows and everything else. But as much as we complain, as much as we sometimes deal poorly with hardship, and I know these aren't spectacular lessons, but it's 4 hours of sleep, you get what you get. um, Loki's not going to abandon us. Odin and Thor aren't going to abandon us. And even if are going through something really serious, like let's say a natural disaster happens and you lose everything, and they're coming around, say Christians, and they say, "Hey, you've lost everything, but to prove to you God is good, we're going to give you a home." And they get you a home somewhere, and they say, "We know you lost everything, no money in the bank, no anything else, but we're going to give you food and clothes, and we're going to give you X amount of money." So it seems to you their God has delivered everything to you. So you go and you start worshiping their God. Our gods aren't going to abandon you for that. Our gods are going to understand. They're going to be like, well, nobody drove up in a van with Thor on the side, or, Odin or Loki, and they can understand. And they would still not abandon you. Maybe years later you would get a call. Maybe you would never feel you got a call again, but it wouldn't mean the gods abandon you. For them, tests of faith can be like every day, like how they handle every little crisis in their life can be a test of faith. And if they fail, God's mad at them. That I had a spectacular chain of bad luck was not the God's testing me so much, though it feels like a test. But it was just sometimes life's a punk like that. Having two people, walk away from patronage and having to take the game back, and then having, I've been in so much pain lately, and then on top of it, I twisted the shoulder out of place, and then all the other stuff I've done. It's just been sometimes life is challenging, and how we handle those challenges, the gods will help us through it. They've actually been pretty sympathetic because they were like, "You really are having a good month," and I'm being like, I know," and they'll stay with us, they'll support us, and even if I failed, even if I said, today I'm going to go worship their god because you're not doing enough for me, they won't be even remotely disappointed. They might be a little sad because they genuinely love us, but they wouldn't be disappointed and ready to abandon me. I grew up in the church, remember, and they were with me back then, so they wouldn't abandon us. And they won't abandon us. They're the gods that can share. Their God is the God that can't share, that demands you only have one God and no other gods. And for them, that's comforting. I guess they kind of like it. And they've been taught for 2,000 years there are no other gods, so you can't even get them halfway in a civil conversation. The closest people that would come would be the UU people, but then it's like talking to a rabbi. You go, well, how do you let pagans be a part of your Christian church? What do you think? It's like, what? What? Because they don't judge each other and they don't question each other. So it's kind of like, that's the church we've talked about before, where they have the atheists and pagans and the Christians, and it's not a joke. It's an actual church. And they kind of do that because of the way their theology works. But, the gods aren't going to abandon you if you fail a test, whatever personal struggle you're going through. And they're not going to abandon us, even if, like, say, every pagan on the planet tomorrow said, "You know what, this is just too hard going against the grain. I'm going to go become a Christian. I'll just become one of those nominal Christians that prays to God ever so often, and He will always deliver me." They wouldn't care. They wouldn't care. They wouldn't abandon us. I don't know that their God abandons you, but that's per their theologians. So it's like, they won't respond poorly if you fail a test. And sometimes we don't even know if something was a test or if the gods saw an opportunity to help us grow and it's just something that happened naturally. The more I work with them, the less I like calling stuff a test. I know I probably do it all the time, but um sometimes it's like, if you work with Loki, you have to learn Loki doesn't break everything. We blame him, and sometimes I've been on here grousing about stuff. Loki doesn't break everything. Stuff does naturally break on this planet without Loki's help. Yeah! And, sometimes I think it's more appropriate to say, instead of saying, like test, because we say test, like, the gods did this to us on purpose. think of it as a challenge you're going through life, whether you think the God sent it or the universe sent it or it's just that's how life works. They won't judge us or abandon us for doing very poorly on that test or failing it. It's just, there are natural consequences in the universe. If, like, we're going through something and we're not doing well with it, we're going to feel miserable. That's a natural consequence. And we may make it harder than it has to be on ourselves, but it's not divine punishment. So really, really, oh my God, almost half hour long answer to this question is that, they won't abandon us. If they are disappointed sometimes, they'll let us know, but it won't be in a harsh, unloving way. You could have just skipped to the end, I guess. And it's not a thing of they judge us. Loki's not sitting around writing in a book, oh, they did this bad thing and this bad thing and this bad thing. He doesn't do that. He will tell us when we're doing wrong, as this person said in their comment, or we're not moving at all. He will light a fire under us, but that's not divine punishment. It's like, okay, you're just sitting there, whether you're sitting there because you're afraid or you're apathetic or whatever. I'm going to light a fire under you and I'm going to get you to move, which is what he does in the war. He's like, okay, I will get you to move. And Thor's answer will usually be, okay, we're going to push through this together. And Odin varies so much. I can't tell you what his standard answer is going to be, but it's usually somewhere along the line of, hey, isn't this fun? No? I'm gonna make it more fun, just you wait. But they're good gods. They're not going to abandon you no matter how many times you mess up, or I would have been abandoned decades ago. So if you guys like what you see, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.